Well, good morning, Starting Line Church. My name is Al, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning. Today is an exciting day because it marks this next season, this next chapter, and this next lap for Starting Line Church and all that God has for it. As we begin this morning, I want you to think about a moment where you've been anxious to get somewhere. Like, have you ever been on a long car ride where you're packed in like sardines so much so you don't have anywhere to put your feet? The first couple hours, fine. All right, you're occupied, you're content, you're scrolling videos on your phone, but then something starts to shift. You start to get sore and hungry and bored and cranky, and then kids start asking their parents the question, are we there yet? Today, we're starting a new series called The Next Lap. Because here at Starting Line Church, we use this image of a race when talking about faith, that giving our life to Jesus is the starting line. It's the beginning of the race that we run with him over time. So as we kick off this season that will prepare us for relaunching to our community, we are starting this series to talk about the things that we need to value and do and step into as the people of Starting Line Church to make this next season successful. Because the reality is, this next lap is so much more than just meeting in a different location or even meeting in our permanent location. This is a season that will lead to a more consistent presence in our community, an opportunity to communicate our mission more clearly, an invitation for more people to join what we're doing, and most importantly, an avenue for more people to encounter Jesus. We believe that God has orchestrated this moment for such a time as this, and that we must be prepared. Can I be honest with you this morning? There have been moments in my life, and not just in the car, where I've shouted out, are we there yet? Even in this building process, I've said it. There's so much to do. There's so much to pray about. There's so much to process and plan and prepare and think through. There have already been moments where I have said this phrase out loud. Why? Because we get frustrated when we want to be somewhere and we're not. When I think about this concept, I think about the group of people called the Israelites, who we read about in the Old Testament. The Israelites were God's people, God's nation. If we were to read the book of Exodus, they were in slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years. And the book of Exodus is the story of how God delivered them from slavery and then talks about their 40-year journey to get to the land that God promised them. And along that journey, I'm pretty confident to assume that "are we there yet" came out a few times, considering it was a 40-year journey. This morning, we're going to begin in Joshua chapter 3, starting in verse 12. If you have your Bibles or your phones, you can turn there with me. If we don't know where that is, it's towards the beginning of the Old Testament. To give us some context on what's going on, at the beginning of Joshua, Moses, the leader of the Israelites, he dies just before they enter the Promised Land. And when he dies, Joshua becomes the new leader to finish off their journey. And so when we get to Joshua chapter 3, they are almost there when they get stopped by the Jordan River. And they question how they're going to get across. Joshua chapter 3, starting in verse 12. Now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. The priests will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of the water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Okay, we're going to stop there for a second. The Israelites, right, they're eager to get to the Promised Land. They're eager to conquer nations, finally live peacefully. But first, they come to the flood level waters of the Jordan River. They are so close. But another obstacle is in their way. And so God, he gives them specific instructions that the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant had to take the first step into the water. And then once they did, the waters would part. The Ark of the Covenant was a large rectangular box about 3 feet by 2 feet, weighing 150 to 200 pounds. It was Israel's most sacred treasure because it was a symbol of God's presence and God's power. So the priests would carry it and they would stand with it as a representation of God's presence going before them. There may be some of us in the room who know the story of when God parts the Red Sea for Moses and the Israelites when they were escaping Egypt. This is a very similar moment, but we have to recognize that because they were on such a long journey, a lot of the younger people had only heard about that miracle. They weren't there, they weren't alive to experience it. And so God, in his goodness and in the way he orchestrates things in our lives, he uses the same miracle in the present as a tool for them to remember the past. And this is what we're talking about today. The first thing we need to be committed to as we run this next lap of Starting Line Church is remembering. To be able to bring to one's mind an awareness of someone or something that was seen, known, or experienced in the past. Let's keep reading in verse 15. It was harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up at a great distance at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Have you ever been at the ocean when it's low tide? When the water has withdrawn and leaves behind a large stretch of sand? Now, typically, even though that part is not underwater anymore, the sand is still wet, right? It's still damp, especially at the beginning. And that's because it takes time to dry. Well, when the miracle started to happen and the water began backing up, it says that when the Israelites crossed over, the riverbed was dry. No sign of moisture. No sign of water. After it just said that the water was so high that it was flooding. So this is amazing. We know by these details in this story that this is a miracle. And so I want you to imagine with me every person from the Israelite nation, young, old, men, women, walking through the dry riverbed, looking around in awe and wonder on their face. And when they step out of the Jordan, they think, we're here. We did it. This is it. After all they'd been through, after all their wandering, after all they had been waiting for, they saw with their own eyes that God did what he promised he would do. So what happens next? We're going to jump to Joshua chapter 4, starting in verse 1. When all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Now choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan. Carry them out and pile them up at the place where you will camp tonight. We will use the stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them, they remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Lord's covenant went across. And these stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever." In our life, a memorial or a monument is a physical representation of something important or something worth remembering. We celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. When we think of the 9/11 memorial in New York City, we remember what happened on September 11, 2001. We know that the Eiffel Tower, the Great Wall of China, the Statue of Liberty, right? These are all important symbols in and around different cultures. Monuments are about specific moments being remembered for years to come in order to tell a greater story so that the generations that come after know about them. In verse 6, the word memorial is used. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and the Hebrew word for memorial means a distinguished mark, a banner, a miraculous sign as proof of something. So God is telling them to pick up these stones as proof for what he just did, as proof to who he is, so that this moment would be remembered for years to come. And I absolutely love this because these stones weren't just random rocks. They didn't find them on the side of the road. They were literally and physically part of the miracle that God just did. When they walked through the dry riverbed, when they walked on dry land, their feet walked over the stones that they were going to pick up. And when they got to the other side, God says, turn around, go back. Stop right there. Go back and pick them up. Why? Because when we remember what God has done in the past, it helps us trust him in the future. I don't know about you, but I forget things easily. Some of you are, unfortunately, have experienced that from me. When you don't want to forget something, what do? Right? You put a note on the fridge, you set an alarm on your phone, you lay something out on the counter so you don't leave without it. We are forgetful people who have a lot of things on our mind, and we see that same thing in our faith as well. It's so easy to forget what God has done, to question that his plans are good, to doubt if God is actually for us, to become distracted and tempted with things we know are wrong. And in God's divine nature that is good and patient, he understands that we're going to struggle with those things. He understands that we have doubts. I mean, for crying out loud, he watched the entire nation of Israel turn their backs on him over and over again for what felt like 1,000,000 years. So in God's mercy and compassion and love for them, he makes a way for them to better remember and better understand. God says to them, remember what I did? Remember what I said? I always do what I say I'm going to do. So make a memorial to never forget. I want you to think about your life. Think about the things that you've learned about God. Think about the trials that God has brought you through. Think about the ways you've seen God work and move and speak. We have to think about those things because life is really hard. Life is really stressful. It's really scary and it's really uncertain. And there are times that we want to scream, God, where are you? So it's in those moments when we go back to what he's already done, what he's already said, what he's already shown you. We have to remember what God has done in the past because it helps us trust him in the future. As a way of response this morning, there are a bunch of stones up on stage that I'm going to invite you to come up and take if you're comfortable doing that. These are probably much smaller than the ones the Israelites had, but they serve as the same reminder. And my prayer for us is that whenever we see it, and whenever we hold it, we would remember what God has done and where he has brought us. That whenever we look at it, we would remember that God is with us, that he goes before us, and that whatever comes our way, we can trust him. So whenever you are ready, I invite you to take a stone and return to your seat, and we'll close after that.